record, and I'm going to say it says we're live on Facebook. Good evening and welcome to another Lockdown Live. My name's Dan Fudge, and we've got Simon and we've got Ben, and if you look down to the bottom there, we've got Irish battling midfielder, Mr. James O'Connor has joined us this evening. Thanks a lot for joining us tonight, James. Absolute pleasure to have you on, sir.
I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Now, we would like to talk to you about your time with Sheffield Wednesday, but as usual, Ben will have done his homework to talk about your career prior. So I'm going to hand over to Ben right now, and you go, Ben.
I've done my usual research. So you started off at Stoke, James. So how was that moving over from Dublin to Stoke at like 16, 17?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, big move to get the opportunity, but it was something I was determined to do. So obviously left. I have three younger brothers, so I left my family and younger brothers and went across and sort of battled away at Stoke. Got into the youth team, then into the reserve team, and then eventually into the first team. So yeah, it was a tough experience at that age to leave home, but obviously one that I ended up really enjoying and was lucky enough to go on and have a career from.
You started off quite well at Stoke as well, and had good times as a squad as well as yourself personally.
Yeah, it went all downhill after that. No, it was great. I mean, the first year, I think, as a youngster coming into the team, it was obviously a challenge. And Gary Megson, actually, he was the one that gave me my debut, and I've great respect for Gary. He ended up sort of giving me my first run in the team, and sort of first year I think there was 9 goals, second year 10 goals. So went from a goal scoring midfielder to then all of a sudden thinking that it wasn't as important to get into the box, and it was it's interesting because as the journey you go on as a player, you look back on, you start doing your coaching licenses and you start to see the game completely differently, and just the different phases of life that you go through and how that impacts your career.
Did you ever think to yourself, like you say, as you get into coaching, do you ever look back and think, wow, I was a pain in the ass?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, for me, it was, I didn't have a lot of real sort of natural talent. For me, it was a case of, listen, you need to get in, and it's you need to stop the opponent from playing. That was the biggest thing for me was, the better players that we're playing against was to put them to sleep, basically make sure that they have no or little impact on the game, and then candidly give the ball to the players who could play, let them get at it, So it was something that, coming from Ireland, I think you get brought up in intensity to life. You want to be determined, and I sort of took that with me and then got stuck in and tried to fight as much as I possibly could. But, I look back on it, certainly I started doing my coaching licenses probably 22, 23. And then you get to, probably 27, 28, you start to rise. So at that point, I was finishing the A license, getting ready to do the pro license. So your understanding of the game becomes a lot more as you do them licenses. But in the self-awareness piece, because as a coach, you start to see the game through a different light. You start to go, well, hang on a second, some of this stuff I can't actually do.
Yeah, sit there thinking, where was I telling me to do this 10, 15 years ago? You know what I mean? Well, Simon.
Exactly. So it was Stoke to West Brom, was it not? Was it West Brom you had a year at the Baggies?
Did, yeah. No, I mean, got a wonderful opportunity to go to West Brom, and again, first half of the season went, from a result standpoint, went well. Fell out of the team just after Christmas, and then we ended up getting promoted to the Premier League, which was fantastic, huge achievement. And then literally, probably had a great pre-season actually that year, and then got on the bench a couple of times, but I wanted to play. I was never a player who was happy sort of just being in the squad. For me, it was, I always wanted to play. I had a real passion for coaching and playing, and Gary was good. Gary Megson, he let me go out on loan to Burnley, and that presented another opportunity, and then ended up sort of signing for Burnley. Had a few years there, and then got a great opportunity to come to Sheffield Wednesday, which I couldn't obviously turn down.
I was going to ask you about that in regards to, because You'd obviously done really well at Burnley, and I know you'd won Player of the Season one of the seasons there at Burnley. But you were coming up to the end of your contract, and I think they'd offered you another contract, hadn't they? But you came to Wednesday instead. What sort of swayed you towards coming to Hillsborough?
I think for me, the beauty of the football club, when you look at the history that's there, you look at the fan base, the passion that the supporters have, I felt as if because I can remember it was Owen Coyle, who I've a lot of respect for as well. They'd offered a contract at the end of the season. I was actually doing a coaching license at the time, and I was saying, look, I'm going to need some time because I was committed to the coaching license, and met Brian Laws, had a really great conversation with him, and then went into the stadium, saw the stadium, the behind the scenes, and I just felt it was the right time to make a move, and certainly the opportunity to join such a historic club was something I was very, very passionate about.
It's a weird period that you played for us, James, because we went through every emotion going while you were in the team. I think, didn't we? I mean, you've seen Hillsborough when it's at its absolute best, and you've seen it when it can be a real toxic mire. I mean,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, what's that like?
Well, I mean, it's funny. I mean, the highs for me when I look at the I would say the Sheffield Derby, where obviously we beat them. We did a double over them for the first time. I think it was 90-something years, which was phenomenal, And then even then, I'll still, because my son was actually, I always remember on the Friday we went, Lozzie said, look, we have to stay in the hotel. So there was about 6 of us that were staying in the hotel. So we get a call. Well, I get a call from my wife saying, look, she was due with our first. So she said, look, I'm actually in the hospital. My waters are broken, looks like you're going to have to get back. Now the game was 12. It was either 12 or 12:30, and I'll never forget it. And I was like, okay, well, we've got the Sheffield Derby tomorrow at like 12. I'm thinking, we have a chance now to do the double over Sheffield. So I said, babe, is there a doctor there? And she said, well, there's a nurse. I said, great, put the nurse on. So I said, listen, I'm in Sheffield. I said, we've got a game here tomorrow. I said, you need to do your best just to keep her relaxed. I said, and I'll be back over there tomorrow at about 3:30 after the game. So she came back on, my wife, and she's like, so, well, like, when are you coming? I said, well, babe, I said, look, I'll be over there tomorrow at 3:30. I said, we'll be grand. And thanks be to God, Ollie never came. But she spent the night in hospital, and then I drove. Normally we would get the coach across to Bramall Lane, and I drove my car. The club were great. They left a car park pass. And it was a great game. I mean, really phenomenal for us with the Wednesdayites there as well. And we beat them, did a double, great. But then I'm thinking, well, I need to get out of here. I need to get over, because we were living over near Warrington. So then it was like beeline to the car, and then try to get out of the city centre. But of course, I'm on their car park in my club tracksuit, and then I'm trying to drive through their fans to get to Warrington. So obviously I'm trying to keep my head down and trying to keep a low profile, but for the grace of God, thankfully, I managed to get out of there and get over to the hospital. But of course, I get there, and then Amy was like, well, like, you won the game, fantastic. She said, but what would you have done if our son would have come? And I just said, well, look, I said, it's 3:30. I said, and there's still no sign of him come. We've got loads of time. Nothing to worry about. And he didn't come for another 12 hours, so it all worked out. But
time to spare.
Incredible.
I tell you what, I don't know much about kids and how they get born and things. You know what I mean? I didn't listen in that class, but I know that if you want to induce it, it's either sex or a hot curry. So did you turn up with a madras or something like that? Did you feel like?
Yeah.
Or did you have to lay on the sword later on that night? You know what I mean? Go on, Ben.
No, I was just before we talk more about Wednesday, when you said about West Brom and getting promoted, you'd have played in the same team as Darren Moore then, I'd imagine.
Yeah, no, I know Morrow. He's a great lad. Delighted to see him get the opportunity. Fantastic. I think he's done a wonderful job at West Brom and also at Doncaster. So Phenomenal character, and I think he will do a great job. I really do. I know it's tough at the minute, and there's a battle to be had, but absolutely cannot speak highly enough of Morrow, his character and his understanding of the game. I mean, actually, he was on the pro license years ago as well. So he spent a lot of time educating himself, and he's a really shrewd football brain. So I think Wednesday are in good hands with Morrow.
Was that
right? So if you go back to the two derbies that we played that season, which we beat them twice. Had you played in any sort of game like that before? We asked this a lot of our ex-players in regards to the derby games. Had you played in anything with that sort of atmosphere before at your other clubs, or was that just something very new to you?
The intensity of that was different, I have to say. I mean, the rivalry between Stoke and Port Vale is pretty intense. You've got Burnley, Preston, Burnley, Blackburn as well, but I have to say the intensity of those games was very high, definitely different. You could tell there was a real I won't use the word hatred, but I think it was close to it. I think you could definitely see that there was and they were just phenomenal games to play in. I mean, the build up to the games themselves were just, for every player, they're the type of games that you want to be involved in and you want to play. And it's you look back now with such fond memories of those games. I mean, the build up to it, the intensity, the rivalry, just phenomenal experience.
I tell you what then, James, talk to us about some of your colleagues. I mean, you've mentioned Gary Megson. By the sounds of it, you seem to follow him around everywhere you went at some point. Everywhere he wants to, there turns up Mego. I mean, did he take you to the back of the Kop? Did he? Stephen Bywater mentioned that that was something that he actually did. Did he? What was he like to play for? Because you played under Alan Irvine. Gary Megson and Brian Laws was the one that brought you, who then ironically went the other way to Burnley after that. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. That's exactly is. Yeah.
Tell us about the differences with the gaffers.
The big thing with Gary Megson, I think, is I was there at Stoke. He was appointed. Great respect. He gave me an opportunity. He took me to West Brom. Didn't quite work out, and then I was at Wednesday, and then he got the job at Wednesday, and I always knew Wednesday was his club. I mean, he would speak even at Stoke. He would speak about Wednesday, and West Brom. But like Wednesday is the history that his dad has and he has at the club. I mean, he is definitely a big Wednesdayite. And his family were huge supporters, and the club meant so much to him. It really did. I think he was determined to bring success to the club because of, I would say, his love for the club. So it was and he's a very passionate guy as well. I mean, very intense, and wants to get the best out of people. I think Alan, obviously, when he came in, he'd come from perhaps an environment where he'd been oppressed, and he'd been David Moyes' right-hand man, very detail orientated, very big on coach education, was excellent to me as regards just trying to, at that point I was always asking questions. Howard Wilkinson was the chairman as well at the time, and between them, I think they were able to get me on the pro license. So always grateful for the opportunity to learn, because again, such a between both of them, I mean, incredible mind, football mind and football brain to be able to learn from. And then obviously with Lawsy, I mean, again, difficult situation with the ownership and the potential takeover. I think there was so many talks of, well, it could happen, and it was a difficult time really for the supporters as well, because I think at that point it was a case of there was so much hope really that there was going to be a benefactor that would come in and really kick things on. And unfortunately, even going back to that time, it's the investment really that the club needed then to be able to go and give them an opportunity. I think just it never fully materialised.
That's interesting. So what I was going to pull a thread at with Brian Laws and Alan Irvine was that you worked with them at a period where their Sheffield Wednesday career started to wane, as does, every football manager job. There are very few nowadays that doesn't fall to bobbins towards the end of their time with the club. That's why it's their end. Did you feel that Brian Laws and Alan Irvine, they're not the most charismatic of people compared to what Gary Megson would be with his badge tapping and all the rest of it? Do you feel that they lost the dressing room a little bit after a while, and their knowledge about football didn't carry us through?
No, I mean, I think they were both very passionate, but I think in different ways. I think when you look at different personalities, you have somebody like Gary, who's very sort of heart on your sleeve, shows a lot of emotion, shows a lot of intensity. Alan, I think, would have equal amount of intensity, but perhaps show it in different ways. I mean, many's time, my God, Alan would be there, 10, 11 o'clock at night, trying to get things buttoned up. And, I know Thursdays for them were there. They literally would be there for hours going through game footage and the intensity that he would bring to try to get things right. He wanted things to be perfect. And similar with Lawsy, I think he was determined to try to get things going the way they needed to go. I think it's really hard for a football manager, because I think you're in a situation where you can sometimes show a lot of emotion, but then you'll still have people that will make some kind of judgment. You cannot show a lot of emotion and then be accused of not showing emotion. So there's a judgment is always made on a coach. And I think what becomes hard for the supporters, they never truly get to fully understand the individual. And there's a lot of, especially in a club the size of Wednesday, there's so much going on around there. The rumour mill can start, and then sometimes there's a lot of misinformation that gets banded around that can then impact and affect the locker room and affect the coaching staff, because everyone's so passionate about trying to bring success, especially when you look at the history of Wednesday, where it's had previous such success and everyone's craving it,
Absolutely. Go on, Simon. Sorry, it's Ben's turn, isn't it? Sorry, I'm trying to go around the room. I'm losing notes here. Go on, Ben. He's done his own work.
No, I'd just like to tap into a couple of the players that were there at the same time as you at Wednesday night. And I mean, for me, it was sort of the first time I were really going regular season ticket and stuff like that, sort of 2008-9 season. And obviously that midfield that we had of you and Sean McAllister, like two real bastards.
Yeah. I mean, he's a good lad, Sean. I enjoyed playing with him. I mean, he was diminutive, but big heart, and wanted to try to impose himself on the game. And we used to joke. I mean, there was basically two little rats running in there trying to get after people, and you want to fight, well, we'll do our best, and we'll give you a good scrap. I mean, that's was the modus operandi, and then try to give it to JJ or to one of the lads that could really impact the game. That was the biggest thing for us.
Go on, Si.
We've spoken about obviously the highs of doing the double over United. One I was going to ask you about is the relegation. I know, sorry guys, against Palace and that game where I think we went 1-0 up and Leon Clark kicked the boardings, and then the rest is history. I've seen a few relegations over the years, but that one really stuck in my throat. It wasn't the greatest games.
Oh yeah, no, honestly, Jesus, even now, I mean, God Almighty, many years ago was that honestly, that still pains me now, and genuinely, that fucking game. I mean, excuse my language, but like it's impossible to describe the feeling of that game. Really, I mean, it's just, even all these years after, it's just that gets me bitter real quick.
There was
the whole experience.
Do you remember the last 10 minutes of that game? Because what it was, Palace had a point on us, didn't they? So they had the draw. So they could win or draw, and we only were allowed to win. I remember that last 10 minutes, I was sat right at the back of the Kop. And at the time, I was living in Croydon, which is, to coin their phrase, Crystal Palace's yard. And I was, and I went up on this coach surrounded by these bloody fans. And I was meant to go back that night, and I bottled it. I went, nope, I'll get the train tomorrow, and stayed at my mum's. But do you remember that? Do you remember that last 10 minutes? I remember thinking, we're going to do this. We were absolutely knocking on the door.
I remember Lee Grant coming up for a corner at last minute.
And then, I mean, were you in charge of marking Darren Ambrose? Was he that good? I mean, Christ, he had a good season, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, and he had a great year that year. I mean, they were effective. I mean, I remember it was Sean Derry. I got split. I needed some stitches in the game, but I remember that the build up to the game, the importance of the game, and candidly the frustrations that we were even in that situation that we hadn't been able to get ourselves out of it. So it came down to one game, and we were fortunate because they got the points deduction, which landed them in the sort of the final game and made it. So it was another opportunity for us to get it done. But yeah, the pain of that is something that I would like to say even now it's forgotten about, but I'd be completely lying. It's yeah.
Sorry for bringing it up.
We've had I must admit, we've had a couple of comments on Facebook now from John and from Vic and from Stan, all saying it's actually nice. In a weird, macabre way, it's nice that it's still an old wound for you. To be fair, James, like you know what I mean. It's kind of it makes you feel like you're part of it. Because, like I said, you went through every emotion as a Sheffield Wednesday player. You went through absolutely everything.
Like we moved across, so we were in Warrington. So when we first moved to Burnley, we moved halfway between, because my wife's family are from Stoke, so it was halfway there, and then we moved to Sheffield. So then we moved across. So we were living there. We were living in Sheffield, and we enjoyed living there. We enjoyed the people, loved the club, loved the supporters. So it was painful. Like that was a really painful experience to go through that. I mean, when you're as passionate about winning and passionate about, performing, and, everybody in Sheffield Wednesday is so determined, like their lives revolve around the club. So to be involved in a scenario where it almost felt like you're bringing shame on the club was painful. Absolutely. I mean, even all these years on, even talking about it, it makes you want to try to go back and try to change things. But it was a really not a pleasant experience.
It's just I've just remembered something now, and I won't stay on this for much longer because obviously we don't want to talk about it for much longer. But
I hope not.
But was it? I think it was you, James. Were you off the pitch when Alan Lee scored their first goal, having stitches or something? You'd gone off injured or something?
Something happened. I got split and I needed stitches, and I can't remember whether they were able to get it sorted. I think I got the stitches at half time. I can't remember, but I remember thinking to myself, going after Sean Derry, because I used to have plenty of battles with him, and I remember thinking, right, there's two scores we need to settle here, one against Sean, and then we need to win the game, So, yeah, I've never actually settled that score because, I never got him again. But yeah, it's incredible. But again, he was a competitor. I mean, he was, someone again. He wanted to win, but it was, it was not a nice experience, that's for sure.
Well, then he went on to be a bit of a bladesman, didn't he? So sod Sean Derry. Let's move on to something a bit more fun. I tell you what, then. So I want to know about some of the players you played with. I mean, you stayed with us. I mean, and you've played with some absolute dross. We're not getting into that, but I want to hear about the great players. I want to hear about the characters around the dressing room. Your Gary Medines. I mean, Jermaine Johnson. Did anything get up his nose? I mean, was it that chilled out all the time?
I still laugh at JJ. I remember we were playing in I think it was a cup game up in Carlisle, and I'll never forget it. He had tights on, and I'm thinking to myself, surely he's not wearing the tights. Do you know what I mean? I'm thinking to myself, okay, I get it's cold, but I mean, like, come on. And literally, he went there. He started warming up in the tights, and I remember saying to him, JJ, like, I've no problem you wearing tights in the warm up, but when we come out here to play, they better be off. And like, I'm looking at that thinking myself, like, if you're playing against somebody who's wearing tights, straight away you're thinking, you make a judgment and you think, okay, this guy doesn't fancy it. Do you know what I mean? So we get into the locker room, and to be fair, there was a couple of the lads I remember were saying it, but JJ was determined to wear the tights. I've never forgotten it. I mean, great lad, Jamaican, and didn't like the cold. But I'm looking at that and thinking to myself, my God, we've got one of our fellow players rolling out here in a pair of tights. I mean, yeah. Incredible. He's a nice lad, but different mentality, you know.
I can imagine. I mean, there's one here. We've got a comment here from Stan saying, "What's the highest row that you saw JJ hit?" I mean,
Yeah.
that's what JJ was like. He would beat three
Absolutely.
players, cut inside, and then spoon one like a rugby conversion, right?
Absolutely. He was so unpredictable. Where basically they go from, he could hit it in the top corner, but there wasn't enough consistency, So we used to joke and say to him, JJ, just be careful because, you're hitting that many people behind the stands. It's the idea is to get it in the net, I mean, he was so unpredictable. I mean, he literally could take the ball from our 18 and go right the way up the field. And some days, like, immense power and it flies in and you're like, wow, what a goal. But he could also go the other way and he could nearly kill someone in the back of the stand,
So
great lad, lovely fella.
Tell us about the changing rooms then. There must have been some shenanigans kick off in there or the nights out. Where did you go? What did you get up to?
Yeah, no, I mean, there was a really solid group. I mean, you had players like Tuggy. Tuggy was a good lad. Granty. I mean, Gary Medine was at a stage in his life where I think he was still learning, still very raw. You could see talented player, good hold-up play, had a little bit of history before that. And I think for him, I think he was still going through a phase in his life where he was still trying to mature a little bit, But lovely fella with good intentions. But yeah, on a night out, he would certainly be lively, And I think you have somebody like Granty who obviously was a phenomenal trainer, phenomenal character, great goalkeeper, and managed to actually get the breakthrough really at the top level, really toward the end of his career. Had worked really hard and then just ended up getting a wonderful opportunity, probably from wasn't expecting it, and then you go on and you see the level he's been able to stay at, and more from a character and an attitude perspective. And I think he's probably a great example to all the younger players that are coming through now, is that the mentality, the attitude, and the character piece, can get you a long way in the game. I think you've certain players, and JJ was a good example, really. When you look at the talent that he had, if he had actually applied himself and had a better attitude, I think he could have gone on and done some really great things. But I think a lot of that then goes into, unfortunately for him, the surroundings that he grew up in, and it was a really tough upbringing. So there's, you look at life and you look at there's so many sort of different layers to it and how it can impact people's mentality, focus, attitude, that then ultimately affects performance. And again, for some of the boys, I think there was certainly some challenges with a lot of that.
Go on, Sam.
So when Alan Irvine was sacked and Gary Megson came in, obviously you'd had a lot of experience with Gary. Did you sort of say to the other lads who'd never sort of trained and worked with him before, say, now you're going to have to work hard. Now you're going to have to, because my son plays football, gets trained by Miguel Liera, who obviously came into Wednesday. Did he come in after you'd left, James, or did he come in just after you'd left?
Just after, yeah.
And I remember we spoke to him. In fact, he was probably one of the first players we interviewed, wasn't it, about this time last year?
Sean McAllister was the first, actually.
Right. Yeah. And he was saying when Gary came in, the beasting they got physically. I mean, did you would have known about all this, because obviously as a kid.
Oh yeah, and for that initial phase, I mean, I think there was a lot of questions around, well, what's he going to be like, and I would say the understanding that now all of a sudden things are going to change, in so much as the training is going to be a lot longer, harder. You're going to do. I mean, what's the woods up there called? The woods around Sheffield.
Grenaside,
yeah. We were up there. Yeah, we did some runs around there, and of course I was used to it because I'd gone through it at West Brom and Stoke to some extent. So I think the thing with a lot of the players, and especially with Gary, was I think the understanding of the importance of performance and then preparation. And I think people, even now as you get older and you go into coaching, when you're leading people will buy in as long as you can explain it and they see the rewards. And I think with Gary, it was very much a case of, look, every Saturday we want to make sure that we outwork the opponent. We're tactically going to do certain things, but first and foremost, we want to make sure that everyone sees how hard we're working to ensure the supporters at least see that the team is really putting a shift in. And I think, that's probably the biggest thing with the Wednesdayites. They demand is effort, and I think if they see that, then they're willing to give you a little bit of time to go on and hopefully show a little bit of quality. But I think that bit, certainly with Gary and for the supporters, was non-negotiable,
I'm going to ask you about a goal he scored. I messaged a few of my friends that that remember you playing for Sheffield Wednesday, and there was one goal that was hotly contested by the Geordies, and personally, I didn't see out wrong with it. Did you ever get really annoyed that people kept calling that goal controversial? It was what was it? It was a draw, wasn't it? Was that the equaliser, that one?
Boxing Day.
Yeah, it was Boxing Day. Yeah, Sean McCauley was the caretaker. Yeah, I remember it really well. Yeah, I mean, again, that was a good game for us, but a game we should have won. I can remember that. So I remember the equaliser, and then was it Varn scored? I remember it was a short corner that we'd walked on. Sean had set it open, and we flipped it in, and we scored as well. So, yeah, I mean, again, you smile at when people say it was a controversial goal. For me, I didn't really care about any of that. It was like, okay, it's a goal. Can we get the winner? I think that's the biggest thing for us was, at that point trying to, and I always remember Sean, he'd actually put together like a points per game ratio and everything like that. He'd put like a good little report together for us to try to actually to buy into and really try to get after it. So it was, it was an interesting game because you got Kevin Nolan and a few of the other lads there. They're like decent, great competitors and good games. Christmas time, Boxing Day, and great atmosphere, great environment for us to be actually playing games in.
Tell you what, it's a crap away day, but it's a great away day because one, you're in Newcastle, you get out on the tone and all the rest of it. But on the other hand, you've got to get up those bloody stairs, which is horrible. It's horrible. Go on, Ben.
I mean, you're that high up in that stand as well. I mean, that's got it. Short of sticking the away fans on the roof. I mean, they couldn't stick them any higher up there.
Yeah, I know. Well,
I remember both games against Newcastle that season. I think we were unlucky in both. I think the away one.
Yeah, absolutely, we should have won both games. I can remember that. Yeah, absolutely. And it's games like that you get to the end of the season and you're like, that's where we should have won. We needed to win. It's games like that then that catch you. Because it comes down to that last game and we couldn't quite get it over the line. But there's games that you look back on that you think we needed to get more out of them games.
There's another thing I remember, and you'll probably remember this, James. I think it were against Brentford, an overhead kick at Hillsborough against Brentford. I don't know if you remember that. I do.
I do. The keeper saved it. I remember.
Yeah.
Bloody hell! The one time I actually catch it well. Do you know what I mean? I thought it was like I can still remember the shock of the whole of Hillsborough. To be honest with you, they were like, "Bloody hell! How did he do that?"
I was 10. It stuck in my mind.
Yeah,
I love that you remembered it. Okay, so James, I know you're short of time, so I'm gonna have to wrap this up in about 5 minutes' time. But we used to ask these of our guests, and we seem to have stopped. So I'm gonna start again. So I want to know just some quick fire ones, like who was the most technically gifted player that was at Sheffield Wednesday when you were there?
Technically gifted. Darren Potter, probably. He had decent technique. He had up and down relationship, but his technique was solid. His delivery was pretty consistent.
All right. Who had the best banter?
Yeah, Mickey Gregg. Mickey Gregg.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think somebody else said Mickey Gregg as
He's
well.
a good lad,
actually.
Mick. I mean, he used to take the piss out of me as well, but I used to like him. Good lad. I have time for Mickey. I mean, he was he's good banter. Yeah.
Who had the worst dress sense?
Worst dress sense.
Because bear in mind, it was a hell of a time back then as well. What was it? Late 2000 turn of noughties. So we're talking look, shirts with text on it that looked like a can of Relentless. Bootcut jeans was still in. You know what I mean? We've all seen that picture of Rio Ferdinand and Rooney and Scholes walking through town. We've all seen it. You know what I mean? There must have been somebody dressed like an absolute clown.
Yeah, there's the lads would have said Frankie.
Yeah, do you know what? Yeah, I think you're about the fourth person to say Frankie Simek, not because it was outlandish, but because he was dressed like it was 1994.
Yeah, the lads used to give him awful stick. Yeah, it was probably Frankie. I mean, they were probably right. Looking back as well. But, Frankie used to give him stick.
Best gaffer you played for?
Oh, that's a tough one.
You're allowed to give us a diplomatic answer if you want. You know, you could say, Alan for this, Brian for that. You know.
I used to take notes, so even because I always wanted to go into coaching, so I would always take notes on all the managers, going back to my career, because it was something I obviously wanted to get into. So the detail that Alan had was really, really good. The passion that Gary had, the intensity that he brought, and his understanding of the opponent was very good. And Lozzie was a bit of a mix, to be honest with you. He had a quiet mannerism of delivering his message. And I think, for me, there was a lot on the detail that Alan went into. And I understood Gary better. Gary, from a personality, was probably more like me, very, very, very intense. And Lozzie was almost a lesser blend. I don't mean lesser in a negative way, but like he would hide his emotions a little bit more and would be a little bit more discreet and not quite maybe quite like Alan. So yeah, they all had different sort of strengths and weaknesses really, but I was very keen to learn and take as many notes as I could on them all,
Okay, I'm just gonna make some notes. I'm gonna. I tell you what it is. I'm gonna start looking for Frankie Simek pictures of him outside.
I've not seen, because he grew up in St. Louis, and we're from St. Louis. We're 4 hours from here, so we're here now nearly 10 years, and I've never come across Frankie since. So yeah, great lad, really great, like smashing player. But yeah, I can still see his jeans in his top. Yeah.
Have you ever run into any of these players? Like, JJ went to go and play for Indy 11. Luke Bowden, Bods was out there, wasn't he? I bet you've run into him.
Yeah, no, bumped into both. Saw JJ at the game, went up. I was actually watching the game, and then saw him warming up, so I had to go over and take the piss a little bit. But good lad. Yeah, good lad. And then Bods I've seen regularly, because he obviously in Orlando. Played with Bods for a little bit in Orlando again, and then managed to see him then again when we were back there. So good lad. And his dad, Bod's dad, comes over pretty regularly. Great lad. So I've met him a couple of times as well. So good solid lads. But you always do. I think you always want to try to keep in touch and make sure everyone is ticking along.
Go on then, Simon. Take us out. Give us one last one.
I was going to ask you now to where you are now, and it did intrigue me, and it has intrigued me the number of Wednesday players who are now in the States, and we've spoken to a few guys now who are in the States. What was the draw over there for you, James? Obviously you all the way through this, you said about your end goal was to become a coach. Can you see America being a real force in the next few years with the investment you've told us about earlier and stuff? Do you see that's the way it's going there?
Yeah, I think for me, the opportunity to finish playing and to get into the coaching side here, because of the expansion that was happening. I think when you look at the growth, as I say, we've got a $75 million stadium, $15 million training complex. So there's teams that are starting to really sort of kick things on, and the game is becoming, I would say, a lot more productive. The standard sort of young American player 5-7 years ago was very athletic, but perhaps didn't have enough game understanding. I think they've made great strides with that. You'll see now, even with the national team, there's good understanding of role, responsibility. There's much better tactical understanding, and they also have the athleticism that goes alongside it. There's a number of American players who've gone across and have played and are playing at the highest level in the Champions League. So, you look at whether it's Pulisic or Reynolds, who's gone over to Roma, Alphonso Davies, who's the Canadian who was at Vancouver. So there's McKennie up at Juventus. So there's a number of players now that have left America and are starting to really impact the big European stage. And I only think there'll be more and more, to be honest with you, because you can see the evolution of the game here.
Yeah, the interesting thing that's obviously in the news right now is Megan Rapinoe talking about the differential pay gap. You know, there's a lot of gammon that you see on social media talk about, well, bloody hell, the men's game brings in more money. But over there, it's different in the States. And what she's talking about predominantly is obviously the international side of it. She's looking for equal pay for women who are scoring goals for their country being paid by the USA Soccer Federation. Is that correct? Have I got that right? It's not a club level issue she's got.
I think there's, again, I don't want to speak for her, but yeah, I think basically she's making reference to the fact that, like, on the women's team and the US women's team, they've obviously won, World Cups back to back. They've had incredible, I would say, legacy, So I think the point that a lot, not just Megan, are the equality piece, the pay scale. So there's a big topic of conversation over here around that, and I know she's been one of the big advocates for that, So it's different here in so much as I would say you have a lot of people that perhaps back in the UK don't fully understand the way things are here. Culturally, there's a lot, and that's what, even for some of the guys that I've spoke to who've considered coming over, I've said, well, you need to come over because culturally you need to spend some time understanding the difference between culture, the difference between mentality. And I'm not talking female to male, I'm talking just in general terms. If you're looking to go into coaching or management, you need to be able to relate to players, and you need to be able to deliver messaging, which then means you need to understand them, So lots of topics of conversation.
Sorry, I put you on the spot there a bit, didn't I? Talking politics, but but listen, James, thank you so much for joining us. Just before I go, Darren Pearce, Gary Medine, who would win in a fight?
I
know, innit? I have nightmares about it.
Yeah, and great lads. I mean, Percy was solid, strong. Gary as well, younger. Well, if you can ever get that up, I'll pay a couple of quid to come and watch that one. So yeah,
plain fares on me. Listen, thanks a lot, James, for joining us. Thanks a lot for listening. If you're watching out there in Facebook land, join us next time. We've had some great comments, by the way, James, on Facebook. People like Stan and John and Vic's been watching as well, talking about how much Sheffield Wednesday means to you. It's really nice to hear, especially someone whose career has moved into a different continent and different country. It's been a wonderful interview. Thanks so much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Join us next time. Thanks a lot for watching us on the Wednesday Week.
The Wednesday Week is sponsored by Michael Constantine Wealth Management. We bet you can't find a financial advisor closer to Hillsborough Stadium.